thank you all for being very patient. We're ready to get started. I'm very proud to have this esteemed group of women in STEM to join us at Howard University today for the Research Day and for our Women in STEM panel. I will start from my right. We have Dr. Georgia Dunstan, who is the founding director of the National Human Genome Center here at Howard University. To her right is Veronica Nelson. She is the director of University Relations at the Northrop Grumman Corporation. We have newly minted Professor Cynthia Winton, professor of psychology and leader of and director of her Institute for Identity and Success Research. Next to her, on her right, is Dr. Kelly Mack. Dr. Mack is a former NSF program officer for Advanced, and now she is at the American Association for Colleges and Universities running Project Kaleidoscope. On her right is Dr. Claudia Rankins, who is at the NSF Foundation. She runs our HBCU Up program, and she's also with the Directorate for Physical Sciences. And last but not least is Lachelle Hatley, who is the founder of Uplift DC, which is a youth education program that encourages women and girls in science and technology. But she is also a MacArthur Fellowship recipient. So we have an esteemed group of panelists here, and so we will let them introduce themselves and make a brief statement for 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions. So we'll start with Dr. Dunstan.
Thank you. Very welcome. Thank you. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be a part of this esteemed panel indeed, and I certainly want to thank Dr. Smith for this opportunity. She said 5 minutes. I don't know if that's just giving. But just by way of introduction, since this is women in STEM, and also looking at the unique role of Black women or women of color in STEM, I'll start by saying I believe that STEM is the baton that is passed to this generation in the continuing struggle for liberation. I see STEM as the challenge of this generation to carry forth at a time where science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are being employed in an effort to help us understand who we are, why we are, what we are. And that is the essence of what I believe to be the message of the human genome. The human genome being sequenced in our time, a genome that deals with our inheritance, who we are, challenging us to look at how we define ourselves and how who we say we are is related not only to the health of our body, but to the integrity of our communities and the stability of our world. The question of identity. Purpose is rooted in identity. Resources are rooted in identity. And to meet the challenges that face us now, I think the genome has been sequenced with public problems to engage us in conversation. And I'd like to just leave as a footnote, the first message coming from sequencing the genome is you are much more than what you see and what your science can measure. And the answers to the questions you are seeking demand that you have a greater awareness of your inheritance. These numbers are less than 2% of our total inheritance is involved in making the physical body, parts of the body. A couple of years ago, major data came out from the Cold Spring Harbor from the Decode Project that 80%, a major portion of our inheritance that is not expressed or seen is in control and regulation. Which means that we have to begin to look at what are the components of our inheritance that's involved in the control and regulation of what you see if you want to understand the biological basis of disease and population disparities. Okay. Yeah, another point. I'm a woman of color. In STEM, and as I've indicated, my area is human genetics. I came into this area because I was curious about why God made people different. Why some black, some white, some tall, some short, some get 60, some are well. Tremendous variation. The question was why? What is the reason if we are all the same and He loves us all the same? Why do we have these differences that seem to put us in different categories of worth and value and appreciation? And it was a search for answers to that question that guided my path to human genetics, where I thought that I would find the answers. Well, let me say, and we can discuss if we can further. Science can tell you the how, but it can't tell you the why. And I believe the genome has come at this point in time to challenge us. The genome is really the missing link between what we see as part of our inheritance and what we do not see. And it challenges us to go into the deep waters of what we do not see. I am now collaborating with colleagues in the spirit of interdisciplinary science here at Howard, with colleagues in the Department of Physics, a theoretical physicist who just amazes me with his capacity to use math to model biology. But the bottom line is he has written equations for me that relate sequence variation, which is what I study, patterns of sequence variation, trying to relate it to various biological markers. He has equated sequence variation with energy. He uses principles of thermodynamics and statistical physics to model the pattern of sequence in the genome. The bottom line is, well, now we are exploring that invisible part that I think is very appropriate for our people to call the soul. And my goal is to use STEM, to use the best that science has to offer, to validate and authenticate the soul as the essential component of our inheritance and the determinant of health and disease. Thank you very much. Very smart.
Good afternoon. I am Veronica Nelson. I'm from Northrop Grumman Corporation. I am excited to say that I am a graduate of Howard University, so I had the opportunity to attend Howard, and I obtained my master's degree in mechanical engineering. I've been working for over 25 years, and I am truly passionate about STEM. So I would say for over 18 years, my goal and my passion was to really promote STEM, to really reach out to K through 12 and get the students excited about it. I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for programs that we have today, the minority engineering programs that really exposed me to engineering. I grew up in the 70s. I did not know about engineering, but I had a passion for math and science. And I had the opportunity to really participate in those programs. So I know that those programs are key to really introduce the students to engineering and let them know that those opportunities exist. I think one of the things we need to do is we need to present the opportunities. We need to make sure that the students have access, because many of them don't have access to the programs. And we need to ignite their passion. We have a lot of young ladies who are in middle school and elementary, and they love math and science, but they don't see that connection. So we can't speak the same thing when I was younger, how we tried to get individuals excited about math and science and engineering. We need to speak their language, this generation's language, and let them know that it is an amazing opportunity to really go into STEM. To make those connections, many of the young ladies want to make a difference. So we need to let them know that if you go into a STEM discipline, you can truly make a difference and change this world. So I am extremely passionate about that. But we have to prepare them. Many times they will be the only ones in the room. And I would say through my STEM journey, through my undergraduate education, there were only 3 of us in the program, and only 2 of us finished in 4 years. As I started my engineering career, I was typically the only female in the room. So I had to learn how to use my voice. And I had to learn how to I had to be confident, and I had to be knowledgeable. So we have to make sure that women know how to use their voices and that they are not defeated. Because many times you're going to run into obstacles, you're going to run into roadblocks, you're going to be derailed. But it's extremely important for us to give them the tools so that they can treat those obstacles as what I call speed bumps. So you learn from them and you keep going. And many women don't have that. It's extremely important when we look at in corporations that they see people who look like them. Because many times when you look at the vice presidents or the CEOs of corporations, they don't see anyone that looks like them. And I would say even during the professors and the faculty members, there are not many that look like them. So it's really important for us to increase the number of individuals who are going into STEM, who are practicing STEM occupations, and who are actually professors or faculty members in the university.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
This microphone is for the audio, but not for music.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Again, I'm Cynthia Winton, and I'm a narrative personality psychologist. And everybody has a story. And as a narrative personality psychologist, I'm very interested in people's internal stories, and in particular, understanding girls and women and their internal stories of success, of identity, what it means to pursue obstacles where there are challenges that they don't actually see, but we know that they will face. And so those internal stories are very interesting to me. When I thought of the challenge and charge that Dr. Smith gave to us, I thought I probably should tell a story. And so I wanted to share with you a story as way of my opening remarks, and a couple of questions that I hope throughout the course of our panel that we will address. So I'll start with the title of my remarks, and the title is "Are African American Girls Who Decorate Cakes at 7 the Nation's Future Scientists, Technologists, Engineers, and Mathematicians?" Last week I was in Dallas, Texas to celebrate my niece Lindsay's 7th birthday. On Saturday, the day of her birthday, I woke up with all the excitement of an aunt with only one sister, one niece, and with no children of my own, and an aunt who deeply loves her sister and her niece and thinks about her niece's future daily. All morning, my sister Lisa, Lindsay, my mother, and I busily got ready for Lindsay's birthday party. Balloons, juice boxes in the cooler, fabric pens for chef hats, ice cream in the freezer, dips, chips, fruits, and wine for the adults, plates, cups, napkins, and the big, beautiful cake from Cake Affairs in the shape of a cupcake, a beautiful pink cupcake, even though my niece had declared to my sister weeks prior that pink was no longer her favorite color. Now it was aquamarine. At 2:30, the doorbell rang. My niece literally jumped up and down. "Someone is here. Open the door, please. Open the door." And the first birthday guests arrived. One by one, each girl found her place at the table, grabbed markers to draw on the chef hat in preparation of decorating her own little cake in the shape of a snowman. After a few minutes of getting the girls started, Lindsay's dad, my husband, and my father started trickling in to see what 7-year-old girls do at a birthday party. There were 10 7-year-old girls singing songs from the movie Frozen and decorating cake. So can we count on Lindsay to be the president of Google in 2025, or the president of MIT, or a biomedical research scientist at Howard University Medical School? It will depend. Depends on what? On us, a collective us. What are our socialization practices as parents, as teachers, as grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and teachers? In a seminal study conducted by Jacqueline Eccles and her colleagues at the University of Michigan, the psychological data on white girls in the 1980s and 1990s shows no differences in the math performance between girls and boys. But what differed was the psychology of the socializers of these girls, teachers' and parents' expectations for boys' and girls' math success, what kinds of toys boys and girls were given to play with, what kinds of problems they were expected to do in math classrooms. Many of these patterns still reveal themselves today in educational psychology research. But is that the case with African American girls and other girls of color? It's still an empirical question that needs to be answered. A final question the Lindsay generation is depending on us to answer is, how do we engage in simultaneous strategic action in 3 areas that build the foundation upon which all other challenges must be built? These 3 pillars of simultaneous action are: 1, expand leadership opportunities for STEM women of color. 2, engage the nation's best sociologists, psychologists, historians, cultural anthropologists in the scholarship on the intersection of individual and organizational factors that promote success in STEM learning and working environments. 3rd, craft sustainable and evidence-based healthy balanced living strategies and policies for not only men but women too. It must be us. The Lindsay generation is depending on us. What will we give our girls to play with? What kinds of birthday parties will we have? Both cake decorating and Lego building? Erik Erikson, a developmental psychologist, discovered in 1950 that during adulthood, people engage in a psychosocial task to achieve generativity, and Dr. Dunstan mentioned this. Generativity is the concern in establishing and guiding the next generation and this is something that we must do for the Lindsay generation. Finally, my niece Lindsay and our friends are looking to us. Those who came before us are standing next to us and looking to us. Georgia Dunstan, founding director of the Human Genome Center at Howard University. Angela D. Ferguson, the highest ranking woman administrator at Howard University in 1969 in the Division of Health Affairs, and who later planned the new Howard University Hospital. She later became the Associate Vice President for Health Affairs in 1969. And there are 2 other women who are likely looking down on us today. It is Ina Bell Lindsay, the Dean of Howard University School of Social Work in the 1940s, the first woman dean at Howard University, looking down with us today. Marie Clark Taylor, the chair of Howard University Botany Department in the 1950s. She is looking down. On Monday, my last day in Dallas, Lindsay and I were cooking dinner for the rest of the family. We were standing by the stove so proudly watching the sauce she made up simmer. And she suddenly grabbed my hand, as she does sometimes when she wants to tell me something important. And she looked up at me with this big smile on her face and she said, "Guess what, Aunt C? Uncle Chris and I went over my homework and I got all of my fractions correct." So African American girls who decorate cakes at 7 can be the nation's future scientists, technologists, engineers, and mathematicians. And who can ensure that this happens? It must be us.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
Sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm Kelly Mack. I am the Vice President for Undergraduate STEM Education at the Association of American Colleges and Universities, and very, very excited to be here. So thank you, Dr. Smith and Dr. Winston and all of the other leaders of the Advance IT program at Howard University. And what excites me most, well, there are several things that I want to share with you. The first is that it gives me an opportunity to publicly announce the new incorporation of the Society of STEM Women of Color. We were just recently incorporated, maybe about 2 weeks ago. We're very, very proud of that. We deserve a hand, all of us. All of us do, so thank you for that. But what the society does and what Howard University does through its advanced program is to create this space where we can talk comfortably about the intersection of race and gender. For so long, I would dare even say up until now, every professional society or organization that is dedicated to STEM, either it focused on race and ethnicity, where gender was not discussed, or it focused on gender, where race and ethnicity was not discussed. And so now we have venues, we have the society, we have places like Howard University that not only are expanding this space, but also giving validation and meaning to the space as well. You mentioned earlier that I am the former advanced program officer. When I went to NSF, there were very few HBCUs that were involved in the advanced program. And there were lots of reasons why that was, but not only were there questions about the involvement of institutions like HBCUs, there was even question about whether or not there was an appreciable difference between the experience of women of color and white women in the academy, let alone in the STEM disciplines. So congratulations to you, to all of you at Howard on your advanced program, on this event, and congratulations for building this space for women of color, not just at Howard, but all over this country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rankins.
Good afternoon. I'm Claudia Rankins, and I too am so pleased to be here. I really don't know what to add to what's been said, so I'm glad I prepared just a few statistics. I'm a physicist working at the National Science Foundation, but at heart, I'm a statistician. If time allows, maybe during the discussion later on, it'll come out why I'm not a statistician by profession. So I want to take the few minutes that I have to talk to you to give you some statistics in academia about women of color. Black women make up 6.4% of the population. However, in the STEM professorate, they only make up 2% of the faculty. For Hispanic women, it's even worse. They are 8.3% of the population, and again, they are less than 2% of the STEM faculty. American Indian women, who comprise 0.4% of the population, are literally invisible at the faculty level. The numbers are so low that they are not being reported for fear of being able to identify who the women are. So collectively, these women make up 15% of the population, yet at the full professor level in STEM, they comprise of less than 1% of full professors. Congratulations, Cynthia, on joining the ranks. Joining the ranks of the full professors. And psychology is a discipline where women are overrepresented at just about all levels, except again, when we get to the full professor level, there's this really sharp and dramatic drop-off in all STEM disciplines for all groups of women. In critical disciplines such as engineering, physics, computer science, and the geosciences, the underrepresentation of women of color is even more severe. And I call these areas critical because A, they offer the highest paying positions, and if we want to ever address the health gap between men and women, it would come in some of these professions. And secondly, these are high impact professions that shape the future of all of us, not just the future of the privileged. So the bright spot are HBCUs. At HBCUs, black women are over 20% of the STEM faculty, 19% of tenured full professors, and that's now in all disciplines. I didn't have data for STEM, are black women at HBCUs. However, I'm sure that as you hear the stories of the women here, those who are at HBCUs, you'll maybe hear that they still, even at HBCUs, face significant challenges. I want to thank Cynthia personally for her story about young girls. I have two granddaughters, ages 4 and 6, two little African American girls, and Kelly and I sometimes have discussions about the toys I provide for them. Like an avid puzzle, Lego, blocks, whatever person. And Kelly said, but they can have one Barbie. And I said, no, they can't even have one. And they too
I had
now.
a Barbie.
They too declared pink obsolete. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kimberly Jones. She is a professor and chair of civil engineering here at Howard University. Howard University has the distinction of having an engineering college that has 2 African American female chairs and an interim dean that is also African American. So we are very unique and very privileged. So I'd like to go to Dr. Jones for her opening remarks. And thanks.
Hi, everybody. First, I do feel like I should start by apologizing for being late. Today is Accepted Students Day at Howard, so all the students were accepted, visit the departments, and the department chairs are supposed to welcome them. Dr. Smith got an excuse because she was running this panel. I did not get an excuse, so I had to go and talk to the incoming students, so I do apologize for being late to the panel today. I'm an environmental engineer by training. I went to Howard as an undergraduate. I then left and went to University of Illinois for my master's, and then Johns Hopkins for my PhD, and then I came back to Howard to teach. And I've been here for 18 years. And so I do, I think it still surprises me when I hear that there's still a problem with women, African American women in STEM. Despite lots of things that have been done, the problem persists, and I would love to hear us, I don't know if that's part of what we'll talk about today, but talk about some solutions. I think I've heard the comments from a lot of folks, and we see what the problems are. There's a pipeline issue. There's an issue with boys and girls. Actually, I have 2 sons, and it's funny, my story that I'll tell is my son, this is about a month ago, my son just started playing chess. And I was talking to one of my colleagues, and I happened to mention, I said, my son just started chess. It's really weird. When I took him to play, there were only about, maybe 5% girls. It's like all these little boys playing chess. And my colleague looked at me and said, well, of course, boys need to learn strategy. And I thought, girls, and it was funny. He said that to me and just, didn't realize for about 10 seconds after I just stared at him that what you just said is probably kind of odd. So anyway, so this is happening now. So I do think it's something that we need to start to address. I think, unfortunately, in order to deal with the issue of women in STEM, African American or black women in STEM, it is important to understand that when you're what they call a double minority, I don't even know if they still use that term, I've heard that a lot in my career, it does make for a kind of lonely ride sometimes, and we do need the support there. Yesterday I gave a keynote at the University of Illinois, one of my alma maters, and we have a student there. She got her bachelor's at Howard, and she's now there in a master's program. And, I gave a keynote and finished, and she came over to me and she said, how do you deal with always being the only one? And when I went to University of Illinois, I got my master's there about 20 years ago now. And I was the only black woman in the program. Right now, 23 years later, the student from Howard is the only African American woman in the program. So, it is disturbing to me that in 20 years, she's right where I was 20 years ago. And, it's very frustrating. So we have these venues, these events, but I can go down and it was actually pretty sad yesterday when she asked me because I didn't have an answer for her. I told her, my only answer was, you kind of have to ignore it. And I don't think that's an appropriate answer. I don't think you should, have to tell girls, it's a coping mechanism and what else are you going to do? But I do think it's time for everyone to own that situation and realize that we have to make a difference. And if we don't, we're in trouble. The diversity studies, studies are starting to come out now. I just read one yesterday in Forbes where they're starting to say, it increases, it helps your bottom line if you have more women managers. And, so you see all these studies. It's not just the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do for business, and it's the smart thing to do for generating new ideas, and it's a good thing to do, and it's smart and it's right, but it's still not being done. And I do think we have to talk about some real solutions to try to get us there. So I'll stop right there, but I do hope we get a chance to talk about some of that today.
Last but not least, right? Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. My name is Lachelle Hatley. I am a two-time graduate of Harvard University as well. I got my undergrad here in computer engineering and master's in computer science. I'm now a PhD student at George Mason in learning technologies. I got my master's many moons ago here at Howard. So between that time is kind of what I want to represent, or what I'm probably here to represent, what I did during that time. And so I have a nonprofit organization that I started with my family in 1999. And shortly after that, it was easy to focus on STEM, one, because computer science was and still is my passion. So it was easy for me to just say, hey, this is what I want to teach. And I'll kind of share how I got to that point. But in terms of opening remarks, I just wanted to share that I've taught from ages 3 on up, even to 73, as a matter of fact. So I'm here representing a woman in STEM who teaches young girls or women in STEM. And I think I'm the other bookend to the baton that Dr. Dunstan mentioned. And I'm kind of pleased to hear that all the statements in between kind of support exactly what I'm saying from an empirical standpoint. So with that, I just want to leave you all with 3 statements. One is let me go in order. One is, it takes a village. The second is, be the match. And the third is, thoughts become things. Now, these are probably statements you heard before or you're familiar with, but I hope that I can shed new light on them just based on my experience. So you can repeat them with me now. We'll go, it takes a village.
It takes a village.
Everybody knows the end of that, to raise a child, but we'll stop at it takes a village. Be the match. Be the match. That is the bone marrow slogan, to solicit bone marrow matches. And then thoughts become things. Okay, great. Good. So these statements, I'm an educator, I can't help it. So these statements actually deal with, in my experience of teaching over the last 15 or so years, these particular statements, when I was trying to figure out I have 5 minutes, what do I want to say? These particular statements are relevant for all children of color, not just girls, but, so I'm going to talk about all of them, but, so if you hear me just say young people, girls, I'll probably do that interchangeably. So they represent potential solutions to the barriers, okay? So for one, let me just say premise, I do not believe for 1 second that young girls or young children of color cannot do well in STEM. I mean, they can. I don't believe that they can. I don't believe that there's a cognitive problem. I mean, they can do it. I've seen it happen time and time again. However, what I have learned is that from getting to know them and interacting with them for over however long I have been in the room with them, that often they have much more to face and conquer before they can even sit down and be curious or even open-minded towards grasping what a math equation might look like when it's solved, or what a computer program might look like when it's finished. And these have nothing what they have to face. They have nothing to do with STEM topics. They might include struggling with low self-esteem, overcoming negative stereotypes, lack of positive role models or supporters, or even just folks who can just understand them. And you were talking about you have to speak their language. But not only understand them, value them. And there's just a lack of preparation in many cases. Very often it takes several hours, if not days, if not weeks,
to help them break through these barriers, to just be willing after that to sit down and explore without fear. I'll tell you an example. Last summer, I was teaching a group of teenagers how to develop a mobile app, a game, and a website. We had 6 weeks to do it. And the first day, there was four young men and 1 girl. And they had to sit around and introduce themselves. And for 40 minutes, the young girl just sat there. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want to say anything. What do you do with that, right? I mean, so for 40 minutes, we waited. And I tried to say, you have a voice. I tried to encourage her the entire time. But she just looked at us and she did not value her voice at all. She did not want to share. 6 weeks later, she became the manager of the group. She was the first one to complete her individual app project, and she kept everybody in line in just 6 weeks. And they were with me from 9 to 5 every day of those 6 weeks. So that's just one example. But it took us waiting 40 minutes for her to realize we're not going anywhere, and she has to say something. She has to use her voice. So I just want to use that as one example. I started teaching basically while I was here as a grad student in computer science at a local nonprofit. And my plan was to teach a bunch of girls, mostly girls, their way around the keyboard. They were 6 years old. And within 5 minutes, I was shocked. Guess what they didn't know? Their alphabet. You can't teach how to type or teach your way around the keyboard if you don't know your alphabet. So I had to move computer science to the side and work with, this is an A, this is a B, for the next, I don't even know how long. I don't even remember how long it took. I actually ran into one of them the other day around Busboys and Poets, and they remembered that I taught them their alphabet. It was quite a rewarding experience. But that's just an example of, they probably could have passed me in typing speed and who knows what, but they were just a lack of preparation. So these are just some examples, and that particular example of lack of preparation just takes me to the first statement. It takes a village. So of course, it takes a village to raise a child. Probably worked with their parents when they got home, their teachers. They probably paid attention more because they were focusing on their alphabet. Who knows? But it takes a village to raise a child, right? Everybody knows that part. But I want to kind of throw that on its head a little bit and let you know that members of your village should be vetted, right? I mean, it can't just be everybody in the village. They should be vetted. And spending years and years with some of these young people, they're vetting too. So just be prepared. But in terms of the village, everyone in the village has something to offer once they're vetted, right? They get vetted, then they have something to offer. This implies that they're not just learning one thing. For instance, if you put it in the context of this conversation, we're not just teaching science and mathematics. We're teaching a lot of things. So for instance, a child might learn cleanliness and organization from her grandparents, economics from the store clerk, friendliness and compassion from her neighbors, and persistence from the smallest boy on the basketball court who continues to practice even when everyone else leaves. So it truly does take a village, and we all should be mindful of the villages that we play a part in. That brings me to the second statement, and that is be the match. So you want to be a match to this person's village. You want to have the characteristics and be a role model as often as you can. We should strive to do that. So let's see what I want to say. Right. So this means be a match not only in your actions, but also in your messages. Right now, for instance, in the context of this conversation, the message from the village is that young girls are missing in STEM. If I were a young girl, 7 years old, and you told me young girls are missing in STEM, I don't want to be there, right? So there has to be another way to represent the low numbers. Perhaps we can say the number of girls are consistently growing in STEM. Okay, so we have to watch our language, and that brings me to the third and final statement, and that is thoughts become things. And that is a kind of a generalized summary of thoughts become beliefs, beliefs become actions, actions become behaviors, behaviors become habits, and habits become character. So essentially, we just need to watch how we think about STEM. We need to watch how we share our statistics to these young girls in STEM, and just be the match and be mindful of the village that you're in. Thank you.
I'm going to let the audience, I see some people who really want to get in and ask some questions, so I will let the audience get in first. Does anyone have a question?
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and I'd like to thank the entire panel. This was really phenomenal and in many ways humbling to hear all of your comments. And I have a question. I'm Beth Marieneck, a current program officer at the National Science Foundation for Advance, following on from Kelly's leadership. And following on from Dr. Jones's question, I have something for the whole panel to ask you, because it's something that I'm asked on almost a daily basis. We've been investing 20 years, and so little appears to have changed. So I asked this panel, which is really diverse in any number of ways, because we've got corporate, we've got university, research, nonprofit, government. So what do you think has been really effective? I'm going to try to follow on from your approach to be positive and how we phrase it. So what's been really effective, and what might be some creative ways to partner and collaborate to really intensify the effectiveness of what we've found and create new collaborative strategies?
Don't all speak at once.
I'll speak from K through 12 perspective. So I think what I've noticed is that in terms of what appeals to girls versus what appeals to boys, if we wanted to do a gender comparison, boys tend to be motivated by the end result, making the robot go across the floor or seeing the act being done. And so you'll find that a lot of educational programs, that's what they teach. That's what they say. We're going to teach you how to make an app. We're going to teach you how to build a robot. Girls, however, want to understand the strategy or the process of thinking. What is the task at hand? What does it demand from them internally, both from a intellectual capacity, persistence? They want to know, how is it being done? They could care less sometimes that the app gets finished or the robot gets built, but learning actually how to get from A to B, from not knowing to knowing, is what intrigues them the most, I found.
I would like to add, as a female, a lot of times we like to see what difference are we going to make, okay? And I know that that's what really drives me. So when I talk to students, we're in large groups and we're doing a lot of STEM activities, and again, you see the boys that really get into it, and the girls will sit back. Number one, they're not using their voice, and number two, they can't see that connection. So what we try to do when we go to the universities and when we go to the K through 12, we really talk to the students about the difference that they can make. And we give them the background on the project, and that really gets them involved. One thing I would like to add is we do a lot of things with promoting STEM K through 12, but I think as far as corporations and universities, it is critical that we partner we get the students there, but we need to work on retention, because the students will come in, and you know that as in their freshman year, and then all of a sudden they realize this is not for me. So we really need to do more in that arena, and we need the corporations and the universities to really partner in those areas.
So I wanted to add something to this question in particular, because I'm asked this question also in the line of work that I do with regard to undergraduate education. So I want to speak about education just in general, that whole sphere. And I couldn't say what I will say now when I was at the NSF, but I'm not there now, so I can say what I'm going to say. And that is that we have to figure out how to bring people to a point where they are no longer comparing the funding that has been devoted to education, STEM education, particularly underrepresented groups in STEM education, without looking at levels of funding across the whole sphere of STEM, across the whole sphere of the biomedical sciences. What if we had invested in higher education and STEM and underrepresented minorities at the level at which we've invested in some other initiative, major initiatives in this country? Then we could begin to ask that kind of a question, that we've been funding it for so long. We have to be able to consider that we have been, as a nation, underfunding education. And so when these initiatives are underfunded, then we continue to perpetuate this cycle and we don't move forward. The other thing that I would add is that we've heard people on this panel today talk about the value of diversity. And I think, is it Nicole?
Kim Jones.
Kim, I'm sorry. You mentioned much of the literature, and it's been in the literature for a while, noting that having diverse groups, having diverse boards is better for the bottom line, that it creates better innovation for the company, for the organization. We even have literature that says that it is better for the education of all students when the faculty is diverse. However, when these decisions are being made about funding and the initiatives that should be done or implemented and where it should be implemented and how and the collaborations that should be done, is it the case that these are always diverse groups that have come together to make these kinds of decisions? And if it is not, then we are not capitalizing on the kind of diversity that we might need to come up with these big solutions that would be relevant not just for certain audiences, but for all audiences. And we've seen that even in advance. And I talked about when I came and there weren't many HBCUs that were involved. And we have a paper coming out of peer review at my organization that says, it's by Jovanovich and Armstrong, and it's very, very clear that Advance, after all of these years, though it has been beneficial to white women, has not done much for women of color. And when we look at the PI portfolio, for instance, it's getting better now. We haven't seen a lot of diversity in that pool. So I'll stop there in case anybody wants to add something.
I just wanted to add something from the perspective of scholarship. One of the things that I would suggest we need to do is have a considerable investment in research science pursuing these questions. Because in the Identity and Success Research Lab with a planning grant from the National Science Foundation, HBCU Up, what we discovered is when we look and did a meta-analysis of the literature, there are roughly about 116 studies that exist that really try to explore the issue of women. We looked at African American women in STEM. And one of my research assistants, Rico Hill, is here, so I better get this right. That's a very small knowledge base, and when we delve deeper and we looked at who's doing this research, it's largely doctoral students. And what happens is that it's unpublished. For some reason, these doctoral students are not pursuing this research as part of their career trajectory, so there's no sustainability. In terms of the methodological innovation of this research, it was very antiquated in terms of some of the new methodologies and analyses that are available in the social science fields. And so in some ways, we are shooting in the dark. We are using common sense strategies when it comes to girls and African American women. But I think if we really make an effort, and that's something that we're trying to do here at Howard with our Advance and also a national center that I am planning, we can have programs that are developed and policies that are informed by an empirical knowledge base. And we really need to collaborate and make this an interdisciplinary effort, as well as engage with partnerships between university, corporate, and individual funders to sustain this.
I have one question. I want to take this discussion back to the academic realm and particularly focusing on HBCUs, and I'll get you to respond to this. Quite often I'm asked, why do you need advance at an HBCU? Why do you need advance at Howard? You know, what is the purpose of an advance at a Howard University? And so in the context of women in STEM, in the HBCU space, can you speak to some of the positives that you think women of color in STEM bring to that experience?
Okay, thank you. I also, just let me add to, as a segue, the comment I wanted to make. What do we do different? I think, oddly enough, and even the genome points to this, I think we have to look at the values of our society in terms of making change. And we have to recognize that the current construct that we have with all of its challenges are nested in a value system and a way of thinking. Okay? So while I fully appreciate all of the, and not to mean demeaning, but incremental things that we can do to change the numbers, I'm a firm believer that unless we recognize that the numbers are a reflection of the way we think, especially about ourselves, who we are. And that's the intersection. Even though genomics is a science, it's actually challenging us to think outside the box, or outside, first of all, to see that we all share a way of thinking that can't be unrelated to the sets of problems that we deal with. And a possible solution is, at the same time while you're considering some of the incremental things that you can do to change the numbers, take heart in knowing that the process is already ongoing. And the fact that we're here today gives some heart to maybe those decisions weren't made with a direct intent to make a change, but we're part of a much larger context of life that is leading to the things that we desire. Now, what I don't want to get abstract because this is very practical. Howard University is unique. We've reflected it here in terms of the numbers that it has, but it is unique out of our history as a people. The mere fact that we have 13 colleges that deal with all the elements of society. I mention that to say that we as a society and a scientific institution ought to be really asking, how do we take advantage of this national resource in terms of understanding the consciousness? Advance, I love it, advance it, what? Institutional transformation. Not change in number, transformation, change from the inside out, change in the way you think, the way you speak, and that grows out of how you see yourself. And that's why I'm suggesting that the solution is, yes, do all the things that we know that have worked and we need to do to increase the numbers, the toys, and all that's good. I love the diversity of all of those ideas. But at the same time, we have to engage our society in a conversation that helps understand that you can't solve the problem of the group within the group. You got to get outside to see the best strategy. And what am I getting at? What we think about ourselves. Howard University is a natural laboratory for us to begin to ask how our health, how our society, how our government, how everything is related to how we think about ourselves. Not only us, but outside. We tend to operate in our society from a deficit model. Even now, we come with the idea that you're missing something. And we want to come with ways to give you that for fullness of life. But the genome comes very different. And it says you come fully equipped already for life with everything you need. Now, how about a society that starts from that premise and then develops institutions to help you discover what that is that you have, that you come equipped with to contribute, to serve the whole? We need a holistic model that lets all the parts be that are already there. I mean, this is the reality. Now, when we do the science, I love science. My passion for science because it's a knowledge system. It's a knowledge system based on observation, experimentation, and but to determine the nature of or the rules, principles governing those patterns that we study. The rules that govern the things we are trying to understand. To understand there's a way of trying to get at the rules, the governing factor. That's why the genome now, the big area is what governs and controls the expression of what we see. As long as we focus on just the content as having definition in and of itself, our construct of reality will not allow us to get outside of the things we're dealing with now. You can't define the content without the environment, with the context that is in. That's what the genome says. All I'm trying to say is we need a new way of thinking about who we are, what we are, how we are. And the genome offers us data that challenge us to begin to have those conversations, to see what we come up with. I know we have to go along the line we're going, and let's go there. Let's do all these things. But at the same time, let's talk about new ways at the dinner table, in church, at the hair parlors, in our clubs, in our organization. Let's talk about what this genome is challenging us to think about who we are, how we're related one to another. The genome is a story. The genome is a narrative about humanity, of human origins, human migrations, human adaptation. And now it wants to lead us to human liberation. And the only way to get there is through recognizing the beauty of our diversity and how we can't know ourselves without another knowing their self.
Amen. So we come to this already whole. So can we talk a little bit, can we take that as a segue into our experiences here at Howard University, which I agree is extremely unique institution and has a lot to contribute in the space of advance as well. Did you want to speak to that?
Well, if I can give just one more statistic. So Callie and I did the numbers once. There are such few women faculty in STEM that at non-HBCUs, there's an average of 1.4 woman faculty per institution. At HBCUs, it's about 10 black women per institution in STEM, of course more at Howard. But I'm saying that because these women face challenges that most of us don't in terms of isolation. So you could even be at an HBCU and be an African American woman and feel isolated. And plus you bear the disparate burden of mentoring, of teaching, often to the detriment of your professional development. So when we're talking about what some of the issues are, I think that's really it. So why are there such few women full professors? We often, because of what we do, get stuck at the lower ranks. So go ahead.
Hi, I want to address just briefly the issue of the uniqueness of Howard. One reason I think it's important to have advance it at Howard is because, well, in general, academia is one of the least family-friendly professions. People, if you're in academia in STEM, you know, people come to me and say, oh, professor, you must just have so much free time. And, you know, it's like, no, it's, yeah, you have the summers off. But if you are in academia and you're in STEM, that is actually not the case. The reality is you just never stop working. You know, there's always a paper to write or a proposal to write or something to do. So, but yet I think many HBCUs, I'll say I know at Howard, we're not really at the point in terms of trying to be family friendly that a lot of majority institutions were. I know when I had my children, there was no maternity policy at Howard. There was no formal, when I went to the faculty handbook, which has been revised. Right. But this happened now. Many universities did this years ago. So for years, if you were untenured and you had to go on maternity leave, there was really no policy for you. You had to take medical disability. They treated it was a medical disability. And so there was no formal policy. So for us to take until 2013 was when the handbook, 2013, to just get a policy that allows a woman to, have some kind of formal way to take maternity leave. Or I don't know if you can now stop the clock, which has been the case at many universities for a long time. Many other universities have paternity leave too. I said Illinois, and one of my colleagues said, I missed your talk. I've been on paternity leave, and I'm just coming back. And I said, paternity leave? but it's great. He was able to take paternity leave to help his wife, and presumably to help her to get back to a point where she could, go back to her career. So those are things that I think we have to have as an institution at an HBCU. I would hate for a woman to say, well, I'm in engineering. I want to go into academia, but I just don't want to do the tenure thing with young kids. It's just not, that shouldn't be a barrier. And so I think that it's important to advance it at Howard, for that reason. I want to just speak just briefly on one other topic in academia. I can take 30 seconds. In academia, and that is specifically at NSF, I think it is important to walk the walk because at NSF, when you look at, I'm a researcher. Most of my funding actually comes from NSF. I'm there a lot on panels. And there are two criteria at NSF that they look at: intellectual merit and broader impacts. Broader impacts is called. So intellectual merit, broader impacts. And I've been on panels, not education, but just, in engineering. And I have to say I've seen over the last maybe 7 or 8 years, even though you have to address both criteria, the evaluation of the panels, it's clearly the awards are on intellectual merit. You can have great intellectual merit, a really bad broader impact statement, and get funded. And I think that has to change. The reverse does not happen. We always, the panel will mention it. The panel will say you had great broader impacts, but no. So I do think sometimes, and I'm not saying bad science should be rewarded, but I do think there needs to be more of a real emphasis on addressing broader impacts in a real way, and not just kind of a statement or two so that you can say, okay, I put that in my, in my project summary. So it's just another comment.
Thank you very much. So they're about to give us the hook in the back, but please join me in thanking our panelists. I think the remarks have been amazing. We have a lot of history here on this panel, all of which are related to Howard in some way. So you have the biographies of the panelists. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to contact them. Their email addresses are there. And please, I encourage you also to join us at the reception. HU Advancement will make an award at the reception tonight at 5, so if you can stick around, please do so. And thank you very much for your attendance.